Hello and welcome everyone to term 4. So as was mentioned at the end of the last term, we are starting with a nice, easy and, well, I would say slightly fun topic called indices. Fun mainly because it's easy, let's be perfectly honest. And you might have heard lockdown isn't going to be going for much longer. So hopefully if everything goes really good, we can actually get back to school at some point in the next couple of weeks. With that being said, most likely we'll still get the indices topic done exclusively in an online learning environment. And when we get back to school, we'll be able to do our final 2 topics in the actual classrooms. That'll be fantastic. So I hope everyone's had a really good break and we're all pumped and ready to, do some maths. So with that being said, let's get into it. As was mentioned, our first topic is indices. So for our first lesson, what are we going to cover? It's going to be pretty basic, to be honest. We're just going to introduce the topic, talk about what is an index, what is a base, just the absolute basics of this lesson, of the topic. It will be a very simple introductory type lesson, more of a warm-up really than anything else. All right, so let's begin. So, hopefully you do have, your equipment with you. If not, definitely pause the video now. You'll need book, pen. You actually won't even need a calculator, not for this lesson. And probably, as long as your timetables aren't too bad, you probably won't need a calculator for the entire topic. So that will be a nice welcome to change when we think back to what trigonometry was like. You needed it for almost every question. So, as long as you got a book and a pen, you're good to go, and let's begin with our notes. Okay, so for heading for this topic, indices, and again, this topic will go for 2, we might take it out to 3 weeks, we'll see how we go. Indices, right? The plural form of the word index. That's the name of this topic, and definitely please copy in everything that's on this page into your book. In this topic, we will learn to simplify algebraic expressions that have indices. And there's an example of a typical sort of a question that we will learn to simplify in this topic. And yeah, so you heard that algebra word. Absolutely, indices is an algebra topic, but let me assure you, it is a very simple, very easy one. And if you're looking at that question saying that looks like it might be a little bit tricky, some of you might actually genuinely be looking at that question thinking you might have a reasonable idea. But I can assure you, by the time we get to solving questions like this one here, it'll be so simple, everyone will know what to do. All right, so once you've got that in, we'll move on to our next page. We do have a little bit, some more notes we need to get into our book. So definitely pause the video at this point and get everything on this page also copied into your book, just below the previous stuff from the other page. An index is a small number written above a base and are often called powers. So if we look at the example here, 2 to the power of 5, right? That's how it's often spoken. The 2 is just, what we call the base. It's just your normal number. But there's this additional smaller number that's written above it off to the right-hand corner. And that number there we call the index or a power. Now, to be fair, you've been, writing down numbers and you probably learnt some of the numbers even before you were first in kindergarten, to be fair. Numbers always have an index or a power, right? They always have had them. Just typically when you're going through primary school, you've never really had to worry about it because the index or the power was the number 1. Let me give you an example. Let's say, you're 3 years old and you're learning to count, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say you write down the number 5. That's the number 5 there. That number actually does have an index. Now, it isn't 5. 5 is definitely what we would call the base, right? The base of that number is 5. 5 is, the standard number. It does have an index, though. It's just when the index is the number 1, we don't bother writing it. We don't need to write it. 5 to the power of 1 just means you have one lot of 5, right? So instead of writing 5 to the 1, when you're in primary school, you just left it as 5, and that's perfectly fine. We'll actually do the same. If you go back to the example here, one of those numbers, I don't know why I did that. One of those numbers, and in this case it's the x, actually has a power of 1 as well, but I didn't bother putting that 1 in there. If you see a number, or in this case, remember x is a number as well, if it's just by itself, it has a power of 1. And yeah, so 5 would also, we've always been using powers or indices. It's just more often than not, the power or index is a 1, and so you can kind of ignore it. So anyway, that's what a base is, and that's what the index is. So that's pretty much everything we needed to cover in this first lesson. I know I feel like I'm rushing it, but it really is a tiny lesson. We're just going to finish off with a couple questions I want you guys to do yourselves. There's 5 of them in total. 3 here, 2 here. What I'm going to get you guys to do is for each one, I just want you to write down what was the base and what was the index or power for each one. Right, you may notice sometimes I'm calling it an index, sometimes I'm calling it a power. They're the exact same thing. It just has a couple different names. So I will keep on using both of those names, because sometimes, you might be watching a video or reading a textbook and they call it an index and that's all they ever call it. And then you get used to that, and then you get to the exam, or maybe you pick up a different textbook, or you're talking to a friend and instead they're calling it a power and you get confused. I'll use both terms, just so you know they mean the exact same thing. All right, so for each one, I am going to get you to copy these into your books. So pause the video, copy in these first 3 questions, put down your answers. Nice and simple, just write down what the base is and what the power is. Once that's done, unpause the video and I'll flick to the final 2 questions. Right, here they are. Again, pause the video and copy down these 2 questions and have a go at answering them. Once that's done, unpause the video and I'll put up the solutions for all of the questions. Okay, so for the first one, the base was 7 and it had an index of 2. Really simple, there's no tricks. I wasn't lying when I said this topic may be our easiest topic of the year. So I'm glad to get it done during lockdown when, you don't have as much help as what you'd normally have in the classroom. The next one, well, the base is x. This time we don't know the value of the base, but, we're calling it x. The base is x, and the power should have been 5. And the final one, the base is 2, and the index is n. So they're the answers for the first 3. The final 2, hopefully you're going good so far. We have a base of A, a power of B, super tricky. This last one might be the only one that might have caused you to pause for a second. Hopefully everyone got a base of Y, and the power is actually a 1, right? So technically there is like a hidden 1 there. It's just like in your normal algebra. If you had like a pronumeral just by itself, here's a K. That actually means we have one lot of K, right? And, sometimes it's written as a 1K. Well, funnily enough, it could also be written as 1K to the power of 1. Those 1s there, they don't need to be written. You can exclude them and everyone knows, what you mean. All right, that's it for our first lesson. There's no textbook exercises or anything to do with this one. Just make sure you've got your book updated. Hopefully you did well with these questions. If you do have any questions about what's been covered through this tiny little video, please feel free to let me know, either through YouTube or back on Canvas. I'll see it either way and we'll be happy to answer. You guys, hope you enjoyed the lesson, and I'll see you for the next